This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everyone. I loved this conversation that I had with Jennifer Loper. She is the president of a company called C3. They are a marketing agency that brings brands to life for families and children. And she has such an amazing and such a non-traditional background that she will share about. And we have this theme going in our conversation around the value of practicing what Brene Brown calls clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And wait till you hear some of the stories that she shares. But here's the other thing that I loved about our conversation is we went from concept to actual tactical, tangible things. So Jennifer's done a great job of operationalizing what Truth with Care looks like within her organization, how to actually make sure that they are accountable to delivering on what they promise in terms of their culture and their values, and to have accountability and deliberate practices around having a feedback-rich culture. There's lots of great nuggets and practices that you can take away from that. And wait till you hear about what they do in their 90-day review and some of the other practices. Just such richness of how we rethink our workforce, who we hire, how we look for talent, and then how we really nurture a culture where feedback is appreciated, feedback is expected, and people have opportunities to contribute in a meaningful way and become a better version of themselves. I think you're going to get a ton out of it. So Jennifer, I am super excited to just have a geek out session with you. And just for the listeners, I was so excited when we met. It was meant to be because you said you have a cousin named Rosie. So here we are for the Rosies in the world and the Jennifers in the world and everybody in the world.
Yes, I love it. We actually had a colleague named Rosie, but it's not a name that you hear very often. And of course, the cousin I have who's Rosie, I adore her. She's one of my favorites. So I knew it was meant to be, Rosie, when I saw your name pop up.
Here we go. So speaking of mutual names in common, we learned that we both have a mutual love of Brene Brown. I was fortunate enough to train with her for 3 days and become one of her certified Dare to Lead facilitators in 2019. And one of the things that you and I talked about that is a motto in the Dare to Lead work that I will say has become super impactful for a lot of the leaders that we develop and coach is this notion of clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And you shared with me that this has been really super impactful for you. Could you share more about why clear is kind is important to you and where that came from?
Of course, yes. So I love that we had that connection. And I had the privilege of, throughout my career, going to many different conferences and having the ability to hear speakers that typically I would never have access to. And so I heard Brene Brown speak at a Women's Food Service Forum conference. And like you heard a lot of speakers and we get a lot of content and there's always just a lot coming at us. And I feel like anytime I hear anyone or listen to a podcast or read a book, if I can come out with one super strong nugget that just sticks out and just speaks to me, it's time well spent. So when we connected and you mentioned Brene Brown, I was like, clear is kind is literally life-changing. And it's so simple in its words, but so impactful from a professional, but also a personal level. And I think when I heard her say it, she probably said this. I always thought of kind and nice as the same thing. And as I've gotten older, as I've had more experience professionally, but even in my personal life, I've come to discover that nice is so different than kind. And kind can feel like somebody's just punched you in the gut at the time, but it takes a lot of bravery for someone to be kind. And that is where I think in the business world in particular, we struggle. I will speak for myself where I struggle. And I think colleagues I have and other professionals I've talked to. So I had a bit of a firsthand experience on a personal side, and my sister is comfortable with me sharing this. So to make a long story short, she has 3 kids. I have 2, and we essentially had them at the same time. So we're going through that experience together. And the other part I'll mention, and it's relative to this story just because of the relationship I have with her, we don't have parents. Our dad died when we were kids. She was 11, I was 15. My older siblings were 19 and 20. And then my mom died of stage 4 colon cancer. My younger sister was 26. I was 30. We were both married, but none of us had kids. So we're going through this having kids without parents. And so our relationship is a bit different because you don't have that quote unquote parent buffer. And I didn't realize it at the time because, as you're living through it, you don't really think of that. So we're pregnant at the same time with our number 2. Well, her number 2 actually becomes twins, just completely out of the blue. And I'll never forget when she called me. She's like, I'm pregnant too. And I said, oh my goodness, that's so exciting. She's like, and I'm having twins. And it just happened naturally because people ask you all the personal questions that you think, I can't believe you're asking somebody that.
Isn't it funny that people think they are so intrusive when you are pregnant? Suddenly there are no boundaries and you can just ask these totally inappropriate, invasive questions that you would never ask another human.
It's so funny. But I'd be with her and somebody would, in a kind way, ask, and she would say, well, I'm having twins. And they would say, oh, what medication were you on? And she was like, I wasn't on any medication. So she had my niece and nephew. They're now 22, and she had fraternal twins. I'm the shortest person in our family at 5'4", and my sister is like 5'10". If anybody was built to have twins, it was her. They were both over 8 pounds, so very large babies. My youngest son at the time is 3 months old. So everything was fine. And as we go on going through this process, I noticed that my niece's head, just to be quite frank, is a bit misshaped. And clearly they're large babies, and medically there isn't a lot of space in there for 2 large babies. So I thought, in just doing some research, and you see this more often now, again, my niece and nephew are 22. The babies wear the little helmets. So that's something you see more often, but you didn't really see that as much 20 years ago. And so I was not sure. Clearly, I'm not a doctor. And my sister has a 2-year-old and twins, and it's a lot. And she doesn't have a lot of outside help. And I've got a 3-year-old and a newborn. And my older sister is here, but she works full time. So we don't have a lot of resources as it relates to people coming in and consulting. So I talked to my husband. And I said, this is going to be really hard to have this conversation with my sister, but I think my niece needs to see a specialist. And I knew that would be extremely hard to deliver that message. But back to what Brene Brown said, clear is kind. I thought, I have to take myself out of this. This is not about me. This isn't about how I feel. This is about giving my sister and my brother-in-law information that could potentially change my niece's life. I don't want her coming back to me when she is 13 and saying, I wish you would have had the courage to say something, and you didn't. And now I've got a situation that can't be rectified because I'm older. That would have been about me. It would have been about my feelings and my comfort level. So it was very difficult. And I called my brother-in-law. It was totally out of love. And I think this is the key. And you have a word for it that you gave me in the business world. When you're clear out of love versus to be mean-spirited, those are 2 completely different paths.
We call it truth with care, where you're just obnoxious and you're just saying whatever you want to say, like a brutal feedback. And then there's truth with care. And it's that intersection, if you Kim Scott's radical candor, it's that intersection of I care about you deeply enough to challenge you directly, enough to be uncomfortable, enough to set aside that you were right, this isn't about me.
I love that. I wish I'm not a tattoo person, but if I ever had a tattoo, that would be a tattoo. It's really the key to making people being a part of the journey of just humanity and having people become the best versions of themselves. And if we can in any way become a part of that journey, what a privilege that is. So I talked to my husband and he's like, this is really hard, but I think you're doing the right thing. They're going to be really upset. And my brother-in-law, I called him. He was very upset because I called my sister and told her. And I said, anything I can do to support. I could be 100% wrong, but I think she may need to be seen by a specialist. And I'm telling you this out of love. She was very upset, as you can imagine. I would have been very upset as well. My brother-in-law called me. I'm so angry at you. I can't believe you did this. I said, I can understand how you feel. I'm so sorry. And I just felt like it was important for me to have the conversation. And it's out of love. And I hope that this doesn't damage our relationship long term. So fast forward, I didn't say much about it again. And then my sister let me know they'd made an appointment with a specialist. It was Children's Mercy Hospital here in Kansas City. And the doctor walked in and said, She has whatever the condition is, and we're going to fit her for a helmet and everything is going to be fine. So, Rosie, it turned out just fine. And the beauty of the relationship I have with my sister, and this is a testament to her and to my brother in law, is it never became a thing. It was like, I'm so glad that you had the courage to have that conversation. And it wasn't something that we had to go back to and rehash. The goal of having her health and wellness addressed is what I wanted. And that's what my sister and brother in law wanted. That was addressed, and we moved on. And so it was the first time in my life, and it just happened to be on the personal side, that I saw the power of being clear with someone as opposed to trying to beat around the bush. I had to have a very clear, direct conversation. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I did, but it laid the groundwork on the professional side to say, when our colleagues aren't clear with us, it does not set anybody up for success. And I kept going back to this mantra, and you and I talked about this, Rosie, earlier when we were prepping, is it becomes more about you when you don't have the courage to have the conversation. And this is a strong word, but it's really quite selfish.
Yeah. And I know it's a strong word, but I so appreciate you bringing that up, because I will tell you that I've been doing a lot of work with some of the leaders of our clients lately. And this has been a heavy development year. And a lot of the development has been around growth feedback, because a lot of people struggle with it. And I find that they go in one of two camps. They either struggle with it because there's some kind of narrative of, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I don't want to step on toes. I don't want people to think less of me. I don't want to deal with emotions. So it's the avoidance because of whatever they might deal with. Or there's the camp of coming into growth feedback that is controlling and righteous and wanting to do stuff my way type of a thing. And so they struggle because they need to learn how to not be in the brutal feedback category. They need to learn to move into clear as kind, where the other people are in the camp of the sugarcoating and, saying what you need to hear, and they need to learn how to be clear. So either kind of camp struggles in trying to get them to move more into the truth with care. And I share that because so often when we have a narrative, and I used to be one of these people, that people won't like me, or they'll be mad at me, or it'll ruin a relationship or whatever. It really is about me. It is not about the other person. It's about my own discomfort. And so I challenge the leaders I work with to say, try shifting your narrative. Am I robbing this person of an opportunity to grow because I'm uncomfortable with feedback? Again, you're making it about you. I have someone who's like, the last thing in the world they want is to be selfish. And I said, well, I want to challenge you and consider you're actually being extremely selfish right now by not giving that feedback, because it's not about the other person at all. Like, if you ever had someone tell you that you've got like something between your teeth and you're like, how long has that been there? And nobody said something and you're horrified. I love all that, because I think when you go back to the story of your sister and your niece, and I'm so glad things worked out well, but how often does that get weaponized where somebody gets into, see, I was right, and then like, you could be the person that you want to take credit for it and whatever, versus like, no, it was something that needed to be said and I'm glad that it worked out, and move on. When you talk about clear as kind, whether it's personally or professionally, first of all, feedback is a gift, even if it's delivered clumsily. And if we look at feedback as a gift, if somebody is willing to give me feedback and take time because they care about me enough to want to help me get out of my own way, or they want to help me become a better version of myself, then they didn't have to give me that feedback. And so I think when we can recognize it for that, it's an opportunity to lean in and listen and at least take the parts that are relevant to us. So many people shy away from that. I want to circle back to that, but I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I think this is going to feed into the feedback and the not being selfish. Can you talk more about how you learned that there's a key difference between that kind is not nice? Because this is a big one that I think a lot of people struggle with. So tell me how you see the difference between being kind versus being nice, and why kind is more important.
Yes. I think when somebody is behaving in a nice way, when they're in the act of being nice, it feels good. It feels good to smile at somebody. It feels good to hold the door if somebody has got full hands. It's more transactional where, hey, I'm going to do something that's going to make me feel good. It's going to make you feel good. And it is a nice thing to do. I think kind is a much deeper commitment to that person. And I think it's a silly example, but you used it, but it really is true. When I eat kale now, I cannot eat kale in public, like a kale salad or whatever, because it gets stuck in my teeth. And we were out with a client, and I had a colleague across from me, and she tapped her face like I probably have kale in my teeth. And that doesn't feel good for her at the time. To let me know there's something going on, I would summarize to say it's wonderful to be nice to people, and we should be nice, but it's a more surface transactional relationship, and kind is a more invested and more difficult relationship to have. And I think one thing you said that I think is so important, Rosie, this notion of wanting to weaponize being kind, I think is just terrible. And I think whatever action you're going to do in order to be kind, I think you have to ask yourself, what's the outcome I desire? If the outcome is that I look good or I get praise, then it probably isn't kind. It's probably nice. And I don't want to give being nice a bad rap. We need to be nice to each other, but kind is risky. Kind makes you feel uncomfortable. Kind means you could be rejected and you could actually be thought of less by that person. That's kind of how I see it.
I appreciate your distinction because kind is not about us. It's either about serving the greater good or in service of the other person, or you know what? I care about you enough to risk being uncomfortable temporarily because it's in service of you or our relationship or the company or the purpose or whatever, where nice, how you're defining it, is it's more self-serving. It's armored. It's I want to look good or whatnot. And I think if I go back to the example of feedback for a second to use how you're defining it as a distinction, once upon a time, people were taught in communication feedback 101 classes or start with something nice, start with a positive, give somebody praise. And then after the praise is done, you're supposed to then insert the feedback and then you're supposed to end with something positive. And we call that the crab sandwich because it's what it is. And here's the thing, you're being nice, but it feels icky because even if that praise, that acknowledgement, that recognition was truly sincere, it now feels insincere to the person on the receiving end. And going back to clear is kind, unclear is unkind, sometimes that message gets so watered down because it's not clear. You gave me some feedback. Am I supposed to change something or not? And then you ended with something positive. I've heard countless leaders say, oh my gosh, I just did that last week. And you know what? No wonder why they haven't changed what they're doing because I don't think I made it clear that they needed to. It got so convoluted. I was trying to deliver a growth feedback message in a way that I thought was nice, but in the process, it got so murky and so vague and so unclear that I left them feeling crappy about the recognition. I left them unclear about what they need to change, and I didn't set them up for success. And so it was about my own discomfort with how to deliver message versus I want you to know that I care about you. I care about our relationship. I care about our team. I care about our success. Right. Pick the context. It depends on if this is personal or professional, but say, I care enough about you that I want to give you some feedback that I think if it were me, I would want to know, or I want to give you some feedback that I think will be helpful. Are you open to hearing it? You can ask them if they're open, but you say like your intention or say, this is hard for me. I suck at this, or I'm working to get better at this, but you matter more to me than me being clumsy at this. Bear with me, but I want to have this conversation with you. If you did that to me, I would lean in. I would go, okay, brace yourself. But I know that Jennifer's coming from a place of love and care. So I'm going to give her some extra grace if things come out a little clumsy or whatnot, versus I'm going to sit there with my arms folded, ready to defend and not hear you.
I love that addition of being vulnerable enough, which is another Brene Brown thing, to say, this is hard for me. And you're not saying like, this is about me, feel sorry for me because I have to deliver some feedback to you. But I think letting someone know professionally or even personally, this is very difficult for me to have this conversation, but I'm pushing through that because I think the outcome is going to be beneficial for you, for me, the organization, the relationship, whatever. And I think people being open and vulnerable in that way, we all know what that feels like. Every one of us knows what it's like to want to have a conversation with somebody, but you don't because you're worried it's going to hurt their feelings or it's going to disrupt some type of situation coming up. There is something to timing, clearly, but I do think being vulnerable in that, like, I don't care that it's hard. I'm still going to power through it because I think it's the right thing to do. And I do like the notion of asking people if they're open to feedback. Perhaps it's, hey, maybe at another time, I have some feedback to offer. Let me know when you're open to hearing it. but I think asking them is just a courtesy that I think is really nice.
Yeah. We might not be in a spot. I know there's been times where people have asked me if I am open to hearing feedback. And I'm like, I am, but I am not in a spot right now that I can hear it. And if you care enough about me to want to give me feedback, I want to make sure that I can receive it. Can we find time later or whatnot? So I want to build on this. And how have you leveraged this concept of clear is kind in your own company at C3? How does that show up?
Yeah. Let me preface this. We are not perfect. And I don't know of anybody that is, because I think it's something you just have to practice and you just do constantly. So one of the tactical ways is we have direct reports have one-on-ones with their supervisors consistently. For some people, it's weekly. For some people, it's every other week. It just depends. And it doesn't really matter to me as long as it's being done and it's being done consistently. So I think what that does is it sets the stage for we are an organization that's open to communication. And this is the opportunity to have that communication where we can share feedback with each other. The other thing, too, I think that's a shift in our organization is that supervisors are as open to hearing feedback as their subordinates. That is a tough thing, and that is probably universal. And that is something that is never going to be quite perfect. But I do think it's like anything else. I can't expect somebody to hear feedback from me if I'm not willing to hear it myself. So it's a very complimentary type of opportunity. And we have just great people. And I know a lot of companies say that, but we really do. And we've been very deliberate over the past several years to make sure we have the right people in the right seats, doing the right things. But we talk about being open and clear and giving feedback all the time, even outside of the one-on-ones that are happening between the supervisor and their direct report. In the monthly staff meeting, we talk about being open and giving feedback. The other thing, too, that's interesting, it was Patrick Lencioni. I was listening to a podcast of his, and this was something subtle, but I thought was really interesting. Because normally we always hear, oh my gosh, never ever criticize in public, always do it in private, which I agree with. But there's a few instances, like we have a smaller group at C3, it's the business development team. We all have other roles in the organization, but we do work on business development together. And there was a time where we just done a presentation. I said, I feel like let's kind of just regroup and talk about what happened. When the client was trying to talk, this individual, you really weren't giving him some space to have that. And I've done that in the past. And that's been feedback I've gotten. Did you pick up on that? And he was like, yes. I think, Rosie, what I liked about that interaction, it didn't make it a thing. It wasn't like we have to have a meeting and we have to have this official get together because I'm going to drop this bomb on you. It was more in the sense of this is something I want to mention. I feel comfortable and safe mentioning it in this group. And I know this group isn't going to weaponize it. The other part of that I like is that feedback, everybody hears it and then they can reflect on their own interaction during that meeting and future meetings and say, oh gosh, I want to make sure I'm not doing that. So I don't know if you've had experience with that, but I found that to be a way to demonstrate, hey, we are open to feedback and we are open to giving it and receiving it because we don't make it punitive.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things with that. And I would say first and foremost, what comes up for me is you have to have a high degree of psychological safety in any team or group to be able to do that. And what I was hearing, even though you didn't quite use that, is it's not uncommon whether it is debriefing something like let's debrief a project or let's debrief something and let's talk about what went well, what could have been better, what we learned from it. And there's value in having those group conversations. And so when we make it about the process and the procedure and what went well and what do we want to change, and it's a psychologically safe space, you already have a feedback rich environment. It makes it easier to have those conversations. I know with one of my teams, we'll be having our huddles and there's someone who will bring stuff up and it's a tight knit team and we can talk about in that moment, I can provide real time coaching. Well, can I offer you some ways to think about this? And even another person on the team, and it becomes almost like a group coaching, but not a ganging up. It's like, thank you for helping me process that. So I think going back to truth with care, if we don't know people and we haven't taken the time to build a relationship, nothing's going to come across as care. So there's that. You can't care about someone and not actively show care. Like you have to build that relationship. And so I think if you've done that, there's a time and a place. Absolutely. And I think if there's something more significant that could be potentially embarrassing or shameful, of course, that's going to be one-on-one, more in private. So I think you have to know your people. You have to understand the dynamics in the room. You have to be aware of, is this truly a psychologically safe space? And if you're a leader, how do you set the tone for that? So I think all of that matters. And I want to circle back to something you said, because this is so important that I think people miss the boat. It's one thing to say, yeah, our leaders, our supervisors also receive feedback. How did you do that? Because we talk about this a lot with our clients, whether you are an individual leader leading self, you lead other people, you lead the organization. But we always say that people have to be both willing to give and receive feedback. I've literally had coaching conversations with leaders. It is a feedback conversation with someone who can't receive feedback to say, my expectation is you need to be able to receive feedback and not deflect it, et cetera. But it can be hard for people to receive that because they can go into a shame spiral of I'm supposed to know everything, I'm the leader. But also it can be hard to ask people who are informal leaders in an organization to give feedback to leaders because maybe they've had a past experience where it wasn't safe. So how have you created that expectation? How have you operationalized people being so willing to both give and receive feedback? Because a lot of people struggle with that. And I think there'd be value in learning from what you've done.
Let's be clear, we're not perfect and it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And it isn't like, hey, have this one person come in and do this training and we're all going to be so great at it. So a couple tactical things that we do, and I'll start with, we do a 90-day review once we've hired someone. So after 90 days, as the president of the organization, I'm on all of those calls, regardless of the role. And if they have maybe dot line to somebody, that person will be on there. And one of the things that is important for me to communicate in that 90-day review is we hired you. We gave you a list of things that describe who we are as an organization, how we behave, what our culture is. So these are all the things we told you. The tactics of the job, like, hey, my computer doesn't allow me to do this or that in Excel, but I'm not the person that can fix that. Essentially, are we paying off on what we said, who we are and what we do? Because, Rosie, I had an experience because this is why this came up. We had the 90-day review and I asked that question and the colleague said, I'm so glad you asked that because one area that you talked about, C3, you guys work this way. I'm not seeing that. And I said, thank you for that feedback. The last thing we want to do is to talk about something that we are and not deliver. I'm going to go over here to the left for just a minute and then I'm going to come right back to the path. So I worked at Nordstrom. This was before Zoom. This was 25 years ago. So there would be these town hall meetings. And so John Nordstrom would be in Seattle, but you would see him speak in your local Nordstrom. And I'll never forget, one of these reporters was talking to him and they said, oh, well, Nordstrom's known for customer service. And he's like, okay, let me back up on that. I want to make it clear we never say that about ourselves. Because the minute we say we're about customer service, there's somebody in a store getting terrible customer service. So I never, ever want to say we are this thing and have it not be true. If other people want to say that about us, that is fantastic, but we don't want to say that about ourselves. So I thought to myself, Rosie, he's so right. The worst thing for an organization is to say you're something and you're not. So when that colleague gave me that feedback, I was like, we have to address that. If we're saying we behave in this way and she's not seeing it, there's a huge gap. So that's a tactical step that we use in this 90-day process to say, in 3 months, are we delivering on what we say we are? That we are a company that's open to feedback, that we treat each other this way, that this is how we do business. I'm really pleased to say the last few years, this is one of the first organizations where people have said that they do things a certain way and they actually do. And then the other tactical piece we use is we do an employee engagement survey every year. We compare our results, but we also have some open-end questions. And so we ask people, are we delivering on what we say? Are we being open to feedback as a leadership team, as an executive team? And these are surveys that are anonymous. So they could put in my name. I'm never going to know who said it. We give people that platform. And then the other thing too, I'll say is I think we model it as much as we can every day. I'll give you one example. Our last staff meeting, one of my colleagues where we work on business development together. We were at a conference and he said, "Oh, I'm going to go talk to this individual." And I said, "You go for it. I've talked to that brand in the past and I haven't had much success." And he had a conversation and he moved that ball forward. And in our staff meeting, I said, "This colleague made this happen. I wouldn't have made it happen because I wasn't as open-minded. I'd had let my past experience perhaps cloud the current situation." And I said, "No, I'm not going to be the person. If you want to have that conversation, you go for it." And he did it and he succeeded and I wouldn't have. And so I think the beauty of saying that is it gives everybody permission to see that in themselves, but also to have the courage to say, "My boss is saying one thing and doing another. And since you've said that and you lead the organization, now I feel like I could perhaps have that conversation in a professional way with my supervisor." So just to recap, having some tactical processes in place to give people the platform, but then modeling it in everyday interactions with colleagues.
Yeah, I think that's so critical because we believe that everybody has an opportunity and really a responsibility to show up as a leader, both at work and outside at work. And we have to recognize that people who have a formal leadership role within an organization have an additional level of responsibility because of the influence that they have over the culture, over the employee experience. It matters. And so if leaders are not modeling it, if leaders are not going first and modeling vulnerability and creating psychologically safe spaces and showing that they're open to feedback and all of those things, it's going to fall apart. So I love that you're systematizing that and having ways to measure it. One of the other things that I want to make sure we touch on, speaking of, are we delivering on what we promise? We know from the research that millennials and especially Gen Zs have less of a tolerance than Gen Xers or baby boomers. Again, we're generalizing for organizations to have that bait and switch or smoke and mirrors, that you say one thing, they're like, screw that. And so you see a lot of first year turnover. And I know a lot of organizations are trying to measure their new hire failure rate. So that first year of like people again that are like, why did you leave? It's a lot of investment. So I love that you're asking, are we delivering on what we promise, and not just at 90 days and longer than that? But one of the other things is we know that we keep hearing with this demographic shift and with people, it's still the great resignation, the turnover tsunami, the great reshuffle, quiet quitting, all of that stuff. It's not going away anytime soon. And one of the things that I've been finding is there's a lot of people who are burnt out with whatever their career is. And they're saying, screw it. I'm reevaluating what's important to me. I don't want to be in a workplace culture that sucks the life out of me anymore. Maybe I don't want to do X, Y, Z anymore, but I still want to meaningfully contribute. And I'm trying to figure out what's next. And as they're looking for stuff, they're like, I don't have the traditional skill set of this, but I have all these transferable skills or whatnot. And one of the things that I love is you are an advocate for being mindful of people who maybe have a less than traditional path and how you find those opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about how you view some of those types of people who maybe are trying to do a career shift or don't have what looks like on paper checking the box, but can be really a valuable addition? How do you find them and how do you nurture that?
I think there's been such a shift, and perhaps it's just because of everything you walked through with people being more open about what they want. And hey, I went to college, I was in a sorority, in all of these groups, and then I got my degree and here I am getting a job. Now, yes, many people follow that path. There's nothing wrong with that path. It's totally fine. But life in the world is just so much bigger than that. I myself have a non-traditional path. So I probably am coming at it from that angle. I worked retail and in restaurants all through school, and I worked and then I would go to school because I'd save money. And basically, to make a long story short, I was 27 years old when I got my degree. Now, I always worked during that time and I had some full-time jobs and that kind of thing. So that was 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, it was like, you're already 5 years behind everybody. This is like the worst thing ever. And this sounds silly, but that was kind of like society's message. Why even try? You're already behind. And I'm like, really? But that's just kind of my personality. So I show up at one of the largest ad agencies in Kansas City and said, I've had all this retail experience. I love the service industry. I see you have an account team secretary position open. I would love to be here. And I talked to the owner, part owner of the agency for 45 minutes. And I started walking down the stairs and he's like, we want to hire you. And it didn't matter that it took me 8 years to get my degree. And so in a creative industry, I think people are more open to having quote unquote non-traditional experience. Clearly, if you're going to be an engineer or a doctor, you have to have the degree and you have to have the skills. I say that because I think with all of that, I will give this story. One of the women on our executive team, who is such a wonderful addition to our organization, I had a conversation with her, I think it was 6 years ago, and she had just come back from living abroad. Her husband had a job overseas. She had a 4 and a 7-year-old. She'd had traditional agency experience, super smart. And she's like, I'm just not ready to get back full time, but would there be an opportunity to start something part time? And I'm like, sure. We have a client that I would love to have your knowledge and skill set and experience. I think they would benefit tremendously from that. How many hours do you want to work a week? She's like, maybe 25. I kid her and say, I think you work 20 or 25 hours for 2 days. But we met her where she was. We are so lucky for it. We gave her something special. She gave us something special. So I think just being open to where people are, what they can offer. It sounds so simple, but that's really it. It's just, do we have a business need? That absolutely has to be the case. Could you fill this business need? And are we in a position where we can figure it out together? We have a fully tenured Kansas City Art Institute professor that works for us part-time. He's done that for 12 years. And he has been a huge asset to us as it relates to talent and knowing the talent out there. And it was such a non-traditional path. We have a finance person who got a young family and she's like, I want to do this work, but I don't want to do it at the level I've done it in the past. I think she's 20 or 25 hours a week and she is fantastic. One of the best hires and her work product is just superior. And I think being in a creative environment like C3 allows us to think creatively as it relates to other areas of our business. And the bottom line, Rosie, is it's benefited our clients in a way that I couldn't even imagine. So it's not like we're doing a service project for these poor people that have this non-traditional path. It is something that works from a business perspective. It's smart business, and it's been a part of our culture. Our founder and CEO has always been very open and innovative around colleagues and how they can contribute in a way that he was way before his time in doing that.
I love that because I think that more organizations need to start being creative where people, they do want to still contribute, but they don't want to be full time. Or what can you teach people? Where can they add value? I think that's super important. When you have people who are burning out in one aspect of their career, I hear from people that are like, I need to dumb down my resume because they're going to think I'm overqualified. I'm not even getting a foot in the door because they look and assume I'm going to be bored. Where it's no, somebody's looking for something different and there's value in that. And so I think there's a lot of needing to shift our mindset of what we assume people want, what we assume matters, and start actually asking people what is meaningful, fulfilling for them. What are they looking for? And I think that gets lost sometimes in this dehumanized hiring process where you record a video and you don't even get to talk to a person.
You are 100%. It's having a conversation. Everybody could be at a different life stage and they have different needs, and being able to tap into what they can offer, where they are in their life, and does it fit us from a business perspective? I've never asked our clients this, but I do think if I'm a client and I see that the organization I work with is innovative and able to deliver high results as it relates to the people they hire, that makes me feel even better about them as partners. Because if I have a challenge as a client and they're innovative in this area, they're going to be innovative in many areas.
Love it. I want to shift gears a little bit. And so speaking of maybe like people having non-traditional paths or having different things that fulfill them, going back to like being human and having this open environment, one of the things that I am obsessed with is normalizing the messiness of being human. And one of the things that I've learned over my lifetime in my career is that there is some commonality amongst our humanity where no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, no matter how enlightened we are, there is a little kid inside of us, and we all happen to have some stories that we still tell ourselves that keep us safe, but keep us small, right? And have us shrink. So what I would love in the spirit of openness and vulnerability, Jennifer, is Would you be willing to share what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And what do you do when it shows up so that you can still show up as a leader in your life?
This is such a good question. I would say early on, and this is probably something I still struggle with, is thinking when I would get into a room with big clients and they have big titles, and then they bring in people that are big titles and they've gone to these big schools. And I would think everybody's smarter than me. I didn't go to that kind of school and I had a non traditional background and I don't know all those kinds of people. And I'm just not as smart as the people in that room. And then you get in the room and you're like, actually, I am. They don't know everything. And that idea they had, I'm not sure I agree with that. Or I can see where maybe if they asked me my opinion, I would have a maybe different perspective. And so I think getting over the bigness of people and their resumes and even the stories they tell is something I wouldn't say I struggle with it, but it's still just always there. And then how I get through it is I just remind myself I have the ability to learn and understand, even if they're talking about a subject that I know nothing about, I have the ability to learn more about it. There's resources. Listen to a podcast with Peter Attia. He's a medical doctor. He talks about all kinds of stuff and he goes into all these details. I'm like, I'm the dumbest person in the world. But here's the thing I love about it. Even though he is super smart and he went to the best medical school in the entire world and all of that, I'm still interested in what he's saying, and he gives you resources to understand it more fully. I think what everybody should recognize is even if you don't know the thing, that doesn't mean you're not smart. You just don't know it at this moment, but you can know it. You can learn it. Like I said, even if you don't know it now, doesn't mean that you can't know it. And just having that freedom to know I can learn this, I can be stronger in this area is kind of how I get over it.
I love that. And I think so many people struggle from imposter syndrome or I'm not smart enough or whatever it is because we make up stories. I always say, in the absence of data, our brains fill in with story and we make up stories about other people. And I think it's recognizing that every single one of us has value and has opportunities to contribute and is worthy regardless of the school we did or didn't go to, regardless of our titles, et cetera. It's the person before the accomplishment. So I love all of that. All right. Are you ready for quick questions?
Yes.
Okay. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
Discovering every day who you are and why you're here, what your mission is here on earth.
I love that. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
Just keep moving forward. Just take the first step. Doesn't need to be a big step. It's just the first step forward, always forward, and everything forward. Just keep at it. Don't stop.
Absolutely. All right, Jennifer, what is something people would be surprised to know about you?
I have taken up strength training in the last 6 years, and I am addicted to it. I did something which I feel like is super fancy. I have a personal trainer. I go 3 days a week in the mornings, very early, and I show up and he tells me what to do. And I would have never thought of myself as like a gym person. I love going to the gym. I love doing the weightlifting. And at my age, I would have thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm addicted to it and I love it. And I've been doing it religiously for 6 years. And I hope to be able to have the strength and ability to continue it.
I love it. Weights are my jam. I will do weights over cardio any day of the week. Okay. What is your favorite go-to movie?
I love Alfred Hitchcock movies. I love suspense, but I don't like scary. And I just was with a client and we just did a tour of Universal Studios. So I got to see the Psycho set, which was creepy. But I got to tell you, I really love documentaries. I'm more of a nonfiction kind of person. So I love documentaries of all kinds. My son is doing a homeless ministry in Philadelphia. So I just watched a documentary about the ministry that he's serving in last night. So that's really my jam.
I love it. I'll have to send you some titles. My best friend's husband is like Peabody and Emmy award winning. He does documentaries, does editing and stuff. So anyway, I'll have to.
I'd love that.
All right. Love it. All right. What's your go-to song?
Earth, Wind, and Fire. I love anything by Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then September. I was just at a conference and the DJ played that. And I'm like, I love this song. Anything Bruno Mars. So really that kind of genre.
Love it. Okay. What is something you can't live without?
Coffee.
Black, or do you put anything in it?
Half and half. which I learned in kind of this fitness journey is you can still maintain a fast, but you have to use full fat creamer. Because normally it was like to continue the fast, you have to have the black coffee, but cream a little bit, not a ton, no sugar. My kids make fun of me for it and I'm okay with it. But yes, I'm addicted to coffee.
Got it. All right. Other than coffee, what is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
I love to walk. So I try to walk 2 to 3 miles a day. I just really enjoy that kind of downtime. And then my oldest niece has a new baby. And so she brings me so much joy and she lives close by so I can see her. And any time I'm with her, it's the happiest time. I just love it so much.
Oh, I love that. And what are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for my health, the opportunity to still contribute to the organization that I'm in. And I'm grateful to be a mother and to see my kids grow into really good men. Lots of things, but those are the top ones that come to mind.
I love that. Lots of warm fuzzies. That's awesome. So, final closing question. Jennifer, if you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Be open to where people are and how they can contribute, even if it doesn't align with the 10 boxes that you need to check or the 5 filters that the HR people want you to go through. And I would say if I could boil it down to one word is have a relationship, a true relationship with your colleagues, with your clients, with potential colleagues, candidates that you're interviewing. And that level of a relationship is going to look different. But the goal should be to know the person and to develop a relationship.
I love that. Going back to where we started, you can't have truth with care if you don't have a relationship and you don't know the person. It's all full circle. So, Jennifer, thank you so much. Thank you for modeling what it means to be a human leader. Thank you for what you're doing to make a difference with your company and with your clients and with your community. And I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
I loved it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, Rosie. It's a work in progress, but it's work that is well worth doing. And just keep practicing it. Just keep showing up, move a little bit forward, little by little every day.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.